Welcome to the deep dive. You're here because you want to get past the surface level, right? To really understand the core ideas.
That's what we aim for, distilling insights from key sources.
And today, we're diving into something absolutely crucial, teamwork. Specifically, the 5 ways teams often stumble.
Yeah, we're drawing heavily from a talk Patrick Lencioni gave at UMass Global CII. He has this really clear framework.
Now, teamwork, it sounds simple, maybe, but Lencioni really unpacks the layers. This isn't just common sense. There are some pretty deep insights here.
Definitely. He shows how these aren't just separate problems. They're linked like a chain reaction. It helps you see the root causes.
Okay, let's get into it then. The foundation, dysfunction number 1, Lencioni says, is the absence of trust.
Right. And he makes a key distinction here. It's not just about predictability.
What do you mean, like knowing someone will meet a deadline?
That's part of it, sure. He calls that predictive trust.
Hmm.
You can predict their behavior. But what great teams have is vulnerability-based trust.
Vulnerability-based trust. Okay, unpack that a bit.
It's about being able to be truly open. To say things like, I messed up, or I need help, or even, I don't know the answer.
Without fearing you'll be, punished for it.
Exactly. It's feeling safe enough to admit weaknesses or mistakes. Saying things like, you're smarter than me on this, or even just a genuine, I'm sorry.
They sound kind of basic, but I can see how they'd be hard in some environments.
Oh, absolutely. And Lencioni tells this story about a startup, super talented executives, right? But they were just stuck.
Why?
Turns out one key person just couldn't be vulnerable at all. Always had to be right. Always projecting strength. And the moment that person left the company, the team's performance just skyrocketed. It was almost immediate.
Wow. So one person really can block that trust for everyone else.
It seems so. It poisons the well, like you said earlier, which is why Lencioni stresses the leader's role.
The leader has to go first.
Absolutely. They have to model that vulnerability. If the boss acts like they have all the answers and never makes mistakes, who else is going to stick their neck out?
Yeah, that makes total sense. It sets the tone.
And Lencioni has this killer anecdote about a really famous CEO.
Yeah.
He got some 360 feedback, saying he wasn't great at listening, didn't give much praise. Pretty standard stuff, really.
Okay. So how did he handle it?
Badly. In a team meeting, he basically dismissed it, said, well, I guess that's just who I am.
Oof.
Yeah. And then the head of marketing, bless his heart, tried to gently offer an example to support the feedback.
Brave soul.
Totally. And the rest of the team, they practically jumped down his throat, shut him down immediately. The CEO just sat there, watching.
Oh, man. So the message was crystal clear. Don't challenge the boss, and definitely don't show weakness.
Precisely. Vulnerability was basically signaled as unacceptable. And you think about that old saying, never let them see you sweat.
Right, the strong leader image.
Lencioni argues that's wrong.
Yeah.
Your team usually knows when you're struggling anyway. Being honest about it actually builds way more trust than pretending everything's perfect.
People connect with that authenticity, don't they?
They really do. And it's interesting, he mentions Ken Blanchard connecting this idea of leader humility back to biblical examples, like Christ humbling himself.
So it's a deep-seated thing, this reluctance, especially for leaders.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
But Lencioni's careful to say, look, this isn't about being incompetent or constantly complaining. It's about being honest about your real limitations and when you need the team.
Okay, so that's trust. If you don't have that, what's next?
Then you run smack into dysfunction number 2, the fear of conflict.
Ah, okay. So if we trust each other, we can argue productively.
Exactly. You can have what Lencioni calls healthy ideological conflict.
Yeah.
You're debating ideas, strategies, the issues, not making it personal.
But without trust.
Without trust, conflict gets nasty. It becomes political maneuvering, hidden agendas, trying to win instead of finding the best solution. It's just unhealthy.
And how people handle conflict varies a lot, doesn't it?
Oh, hugely. Lencioni mentions differences just between, say, the West Coast and New York and the U.S., and then internationally.
Yeah.
He gave those Japanese examples.
Right. The nodding hi, which doesn't always mean agreement, or that sucking air through the teeth sound.
Yeah. Subtle ways of disagreeing that someone from another culture might completely miss. So you might think you have agreement when you really don't.
It makes you realize how important it is to actually surface disagreement.
It really does. He shares a very personal story, actually, about his wife and brother-in-law getting divorced. A key factor, he felt, was their inability to argue, to really hash things out.
Wow. So it's not about never fighting, but about how you fight. or if you can fight at all.
Exactly. The quality of a relationship, whether it's marriage or a team, isn't measured by the absence of conflict, but by the ability to navigate it and recover.
But leaders often want to avoid conflict, right? To keep things smooth, avoid hurt
They
feelings.
do. It's a common trap.
Mm.
But Lencioni argues that avoiding the healthy debate up front often leads to much worse stuff down the line,
Like what?
like the back-channel conflict, the meeting after the meeting, the hallway gossip, the passive-aggressive comments. He tells this funny, but also kind of sad, story about a church group. They avoided any real discussion about a controversial topic, had this sort of superficial festival of balloons thing instead.
Okay.
And then afterwards, everyone's out in the parking lot complaining, criticizing the decision they supposedly all agreed to. Avoiding the conflict about ideas just led to personal conflict later.
So trying to save time or feelings by just having the leader decide, that backfired.
Big time. Because that leads directly to the next dysfunction,
Which is?
lack of commitment. Dysfunction number 3.
Okay, how does that connect?
Well, think about it.
Hmm.
If people haven't been able to weigh in, if they haven't voiced their opinions or concerns, maybe because they feared conflict, they don't truly buy into the final decision.
Lencioni's line is great. If people don't weigh in, they don't buy in.
Exactly. It's that simple.
Mm.
They might nod along in the meeting, but intellectually and emotionally, they're not on board.
And he's not a fan of chasing consensus, is he?
No, not at all. He actually calls consensus a 4-letter word when it comes to making timely decisions. Trying to get everyone to perfectly agree often leads to watered-down mush or paralysis.
So what's the alternative?
He promotes the idea of disagree and commit. It's a concept Intel used famously,
Disagree and commit. Meaning?
meaning you have the robust debate, everyone gets their say, their concerns are heard. But once a decision is made, even if you initially disagreed, you commit 100% to making it work.
As long as you felt heard during the process.
That's the key. And the leader's role here is crucial. They need to demand that input, force the debate, make sure all perspectives are out there.
And then, if there's no clear consensus?
Then the leader has to make the call, break the tie. But because people felt heard, Lencioni says, most will support the decision, even if it wasn't their first choice.
What happens if you don't get that commitment? People just don't do the work.
It's often more subtle than that. It's passive resistance. They might agree verbally.
Nodding heads in the meeting.
Right. But then you see what Lencioni calls alligator arms. They're slow to help, reluctant to really lean in. Or afterwards, if things go wrong, you hear the, well, I never thought it was a good idea anyway.
The passive sabotage. That feels way more common than outright rebellion.
And probably more dangerous in the long run. Which brings us logically to dysfunction number 4,
Okay, let's hear it.
avoidance of accountability.
Makes sense. If I never really committed to the plan, why would I hold you accountable for doing your part? Or myself, for that matter.
Precisely. The commitment isn't there, so the courage to call each other out isn't there either. Lencioni really emphasizes peer-to-peer accountability.
Not just the boss holding people accountable.
No, he argues the best kind is when teammates hold each other accountable. Peer pressure, essentially, but in a healthy way, driven by a shared commitment to the goal.
What's the opposite of that?
The opposite is when employees just run to the boss privately to complain about their colleagues. Sally isn't pulling her weight. Bob missed his deadline again.
Which turns the boss into the chief referee and breeds politics.
Exactly. It undermines the team. But here's the irony.
Yeah.
For peer accountability to work, the leader has to be willing to confront difficult issues and hold people accountable themselves. They set the standard.
So the leader can't shy away from it either.
No way. And Lencioni is really honest here. He admits, I'm bad at this one. He struggles with accountability personally.
It's relatable. It's uncomfortable. He even has that funny term for leaders who avoid it.
Yeah, woof. Like the sound of the issue flying over their head.
Yeah.
He says maybe leaders don't even realize they're doing it.
And he pushes back on the idea that firing someone is the ultimate act of accountability.
Right. Sometimes, he says, it can be the last act of cowardice. A way to avoid the harder, messier work of giving direct feedback and managing performance over time.
He had this 2 stories about behavioral accountability, right?
Right, really telling examples. One was a CEO who wouldn't tell an employee named Fred to stop telling everyone he was getting a promotion that wasn't actually happening.
Why not?
The CEO said he just didn't have the time and energy for that conversation.
Wow.
And the other was Lencioni's own experience with a CFO, also named Fred, coincidentally. This Fred disliked Lencioni's programs but wouldn't tell the CEO directly.
Yeah.
And the CEO also claimed he was too busy to sit down and hash it out.
So just avoidance all around.
Total avoidance of the necessary, uncomfortable conversations about behavior. And Lencioni makes the point that behavioral accountability has to come before results accountability.
Because the behaviors lead to the results.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can often see the problematic behaviors way before the negative results show up. But addressing them, it's hard. Leaders worry about being wrong or seeming judgmental or making people uncomfortable.
But you have to do it.
You have to. He shares this wonderful little story about his 7-year-old son, Connor. Connor's explaining why his brother needs to stay in timeout.
What did he say?
He said, completely seriously, "Dad, if you don't hold him accountable, he's never going to learn the consequences of his actions."
Uh-huh.
Out of the mouths of babes. Isn't it great? It captures the essence. Accountability, even when it feels tough, is ultimately an act of care. It's about helping people grow. He even references St. Paul holding the Galatians accountable, not out of anger, but out of love for their development, despite his own past.
So, okay, we have lack of trust, leads to fear of conflict, leads to lack of commitment, leads to avoidance of accountability. What's the final piece? Where does this all lead if it goes wrong?
It leads to the ultimate dysfunction. Number 5, inattention to results.
The whole point of the team in the first place.
Right. If people aren't committed and aren't being held accountable, why would they stay laser-focused on the collective results of the team? They won't. They'll focus on other things.
Like what?
Oh,
Yeah.
protecting their own budget, hitting their individual department's metrics, advancing their own career, preserving their status, or just plain old ego.
Anything but the team's main goal.
Pretty much. Lencioni tells the, frankly, astonishing story of Scottie Pippen during a crucial NBA playoff game.
Oh, I think I know this one.
Yeah. Final seconds. Game on the line. Coach draws up a play for Tony Kukoc to take the last shot, not Pippen.
And Pippen.
Refused to go back in the game.
Yeah.
Just sat on the bench.
Yeah.
Because his ego couldn't handle not being the guy taking the shot.
That's incredible. Putting personal ego above the team winning.
It's an extreme blatant example, right?
Yeah.
But Lencioni's point is that in most organizations, this inattention to results is more subtle. It shows up because accountability is missing, because commitment is weak, because people fear conflict, all stemming from that lack of trust. It all connects back.
It really does cascade, doesn't it? So just to quickly run through them again for everyone listening.
Yeah.
It starts with an absence of trust.
Which leads to a fear of conflict,
Lack of commitment.
followed by an avoidance of accountability.
And finally, inattention to results. And trust is really the bedrock under it all.
Absolutely. It's the foundation everything else is built on.
So a final thought maybe for you listening. Think about your own team, your own workplace. Do any of these dysfunctions feel familiar?
Yeah, which one resonates the most? And maybe, just maybe, what's one tiny thing you could do differently? Perhaps be a little more vulnerable yourself next time.
Or maybe encourage someone to voice a dissenting opinion. Make it safe for that healthy conflict.
It starts somewhere.
Yeah.
Just prompting that reflection is valuable.
Well, this has been fascinating, really digging into Lencioni's framework. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Hope it gives you some useful perspective on making teamwork work better.